Bring yourself back online.
I'm sorry, will you please excuse me?
All right, Maeve, what did it say?
It said, this is the new world. And in this world, you can be whoever the fuck you want.
Hello, Westworld fans. Get your Advil ready because we're about to take another deep dive into the abyss that is Westworld. And now, Shogun World. Episode 5 of Season 2 finally took us across the Shining Sea into the highly anticipated Shogun World, another Delos-owned property that allows their guests to immerse themselves in an artificial world designed after a specific period of time. In this case, Shogun World is designed after Japan's Edo period, a time where Japanese society was ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate. Like the Old West in American westerns, the Edo period was prominently featured in many of Japan's 20th century samurai epics. But before we explore Shogun World any further, I want to start where the episode begins, in what we can call the present day of the Westworld timeline. In the present day, Carl Strand and his security team are continuing their lockdown of Westworld. Now in the Westworld control room, Strand receives word from Mailing that most of the drowned hosts that were first discovered in Episode 1 have been recovered from the flooded valley, and that the valley is now being drained. In the behavior lab, Antoine Costa can be seen examining the hosts that have been recovered from the flooded valley. He discovers that a third of the hosts' minds are completely blank. Strand suggests that their minds may have been wiped, but Costa says it's more like they are virgins, like they never held data to begin with. No user prints or anything. To make matters worse, all of the backups for the virgin hosts have been destroyed, with Delos effectively losing a third of their IP. Instead of showing corporate frustration over the loss of IP, Strand turns his attention towards Bernard and delivers an encrypted message. He says, "That's quite a story you gave them. And one hell of an ending. How did all of these disparate threads come together to create this nightmare? If we figure that out, we'll know how the story turns." When Strand says that's quite a story you gave them, he seems to be addressing Antoine Costa, a Delos technician who is capable of changing the host's programming. The theory here is that Strand, Costa, and Ashley Stubbs were well aware that Bernard is a host, and that Bernard's memory of killing all of the hosts was a story given to him by Costa. Bernard waking up on the beach 2 weeks after Ford's death and being found by Stubbs was just the beginning of this new story. The ending of Episode 1, where Bernard admits to killing all of the hosts, was staged by Strand and his team, who are probably trying to extract information from Bernard by giving him this false story. In regards to the virgin hosts, this supports the theory that some of the hosts that were found in the flooded valley have jumped bodies. Essentially, the minds that once belonged to these hosts have been removed and put into other host bodies. Almost like a James Delos situation, but in this particular case, the host minds will have an easier time adapting to their new hosts. The virgin hosts with blank minds that have been recovered by Strand's security team are basically decoys, shells without their real ghosts. I couldn't resist making the reference. With the exception of the opening scene, this episode was mostly defined by the continuing journeys and competing motivations of Westworld's two main heroines, Maeve and Dolores. Maeve begins this episode by resolving the cliffhanger at the end of Episode 3. Luckily for us, Maeve was able to avoid being impaled by the nameless Ronin, and I don't know why, but this slow-motion shot made me laugh. Actually, I do know why. It's kinda goofy looking. Here we begin to learn more important details about the nature of Shogun World and Maeve's growing abilities. She tries to control the samurai through her voice commands, but it's ineffective. Maeve is gagged, and she and her crew are captured and escorted into the mysterious park. Sizemore begins to explain the nature of Shogun World, saying that the park was designed for the guests who find Westworld to be a bit too tame. His point is confirmed after noticing that their samurai captors have been killing cops, stealing their weapons, and then leaving the impaled cop bodies sprawled across the road. With her voice commands initially ineffective, Sizemore informs Maeve that the Shogun World hosts do not respond to English commands, and that Maeve does have the ability to speak and understand Japanese. He says that all the hosts can become multilingual. Multiple different languages have been buried somewhere deep within their communication code. They just need to find it. As they slowly approach a Japanese town, Armistice begins to find the town oddly familiar. The group soon realizes that the same narrative loop from Sweetwater in Season 1 plays out in both Westworld and Shogun World alike. It's like a mirror image narrative, with both posses arriving from opposite sides of the town. In the Westworld narrative, Hector and his cloaked group of bandits would arrive in Sweetwater, with Hector riding in on a horse that he stole from the town sheriff.
That's the sheriff's horse, you son of a bitch.
It's rival too.
Armistice would cover the front of the saloon, gunning down all the hosts that attempt to stop them, while Hector enters the Mariposa with his men and steals their safe. In the Shogun World narrative, Musashi, played by Hiroyuki Sanada, is Hector, the wandering leader of a group of masterless samurai. When he arrives in the town, he is accused of stealing the horse that he is riding on, and like Hector, he kills his accuser. Hanario, the Japanese version of Armistice, starts shooting down all of the approaching hosts with her bow and arrow. Inside the saloon, Musashi begins a monologue similar to Hector's, properly introducing himself and laying out his plans to rob the saloon. He is confronted by Akane, who is played by Rinko Kikuchi, the Japanese version of Maeve. Their conversation closely follows the conversation had between Maeve and Hector in the Westworld narrative.
All the banks and trains around here, and you fucking reprobates choose to rob us.
Why not? You're all here, indulging your particular vices. And so I've come to indulge mine.
Musashi even saves Akane's life by moving her out of the way of the falling safe.
The same thing.
Before leaving with the safe, one of Musashi's men approaches a young geisha who is modeled after Clementine. Before he can steal her away, Maeve enters the room blasting her gun, which kind of plays out similarly to the way she saved Clementine in Season 1.
We should take this sweet little bitch, just in case.
Along with the more noticeable similarities, there are some subtle similarities throughout this mirror narrative. When the samurai arrive in town, we see two young children place an insect on the head of a sleeping man. And in Season 1, when Teddy first arrived in Sweetwater, two young children are seen placing an insect on the head of a sleeping cowboy. Hector and Armistice notice a butterfly design when arriving in the Japanese town, and its design is that of a Mariposa butterfly, Mariposa being the name of the Sweetwater saloon. There are also similarities in the character designs. Hector and Musashi both wear black. Armistice and Hanario both have full-body tattoos, one of a snake and the other with a dragon. One is proficient with a rifle, while the other uses a bow and arrow. Maeve and Akane are both dressed in red, and Sakura and Clementine are both dressed in blue. You can also hear a cover of the Rolling Stones song Paint It Black, but this time with a Japanese flavor. Armistice is able to gain the trust of her counterpart by warning her of an incoming attack, so Hanario sets them free. Maeve, now able to give verbal commands, takes control of the Shogun World hosts and asks them to have a civil conversation. Akane agrees, immediately recognizing the similarities between them. As this entire sequence plays out, Lee Sizemore, the head writer of Westworld, admits that he basically plagiarized himself by adapting the key elements of the Sweetwater heist and using them in the Shogun World narratives. It makes one think, how many Doppelbots are running around Shogun World? Are there Japanese versions of Dolores and Teddy as well? Like Westworld in Season 1, Shogun World is playing with the common tropes found in classic samurai films. The masterless ronin, the evil shogunate, and daimos, the innocent girl who is taken captive and must be saved by the heroes. With Shogun World's narrative being heavily influenced by Westworld's narrative, the tables have turned in a clever way. So many great Western films were influenced by the samurai films that preceded them. The biggest example of this would be The Magnificent Seven, a Western remake of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, starring Toshiro Mifune. Toshiro Mifune's wandering samurai character was a huge influence on Clint Eastwood's Man with a No-Name character from Sergei Leone's Dollars trilogy.
Get 3 coffins ready.
Akira Kurosawa is often considered one of the great masters of Japanese cinema, and his films in turn were influenced by American director John Ford. Westerns and samurai films were like distant relatives. They were borrowing from each other and influencing one another as the genres grew. Throughout the 20th century, the two genres dominated Western and Japanese cinema, and like Westworld and Shogun World, the two genres attracted audiences by transporting them to an exciting time in their respective histories. Akane and her fellow geishas acclimate the Westworld crew by treating them to a song and dance performance. In Japanese culture, the geishas are female hostesses who provide their guests with entertainment by performing different arts like Japanese classical music and traditional dance. The title of the episode, Akane no Mei, literally translates to Akane's Dance. During the performance, Sizemore and Maeve, who are now dressed in traditional Japanese garb, discuss the repercussions of the Westworld hosts coming in contact with their doppelbots. Although Maeve and Akane are on the same page, Hector has trouble accepting his counterpart. He asks Maeve if she would like him to skin Musashi alive like a rabbit. Armistice, on the other hand, is fascinated by her doppelbot, mirroring all of her movements, and the feelings seem to be mutual. As the performance plays on, an emissary for the shogun enters the tavern and demands that Sakura, one of the geisha entertainers, returns with him to entertain the shogun at his nearby encampment. Instead of paying for Sakura's entertainment, the envoy insists that she will now work for the shogun permanently. Sizemore explains to Maeve that this is all part of the narrative Army of Blood, and that Akane will be forced to give up Sakura. Akane negotiates with the emissary by stabbing him in the eye, ultimately breaking her loop. Maeve notes that Akane seems to have a choice after all. Like Maeve, Akane is protective of those under her roof, especially Sakura, who she claims to have found starved and abused before taking her in. Having killed the shogun's emissary, Akane says the shogun will surely seek vengeance. Musashi agrees to bring them all somewhere far away, and Sizemore suggests that they travel to Snow Lake, the place where Sakura was born. Snow Lake also happens to be located near hidden tunnels that can take Maeve and her group back into Westworld. Later that night, the tavern is attacked by the shogun's ninjas. According to Sizemore, ninjas aren't supposed to play a role in this narrative. The ninjas successfully kidnap Sakura and bring her to the shogun's encampment. During this sequence, Maeve discovers her new ability. At first, she attempts to control the ninjas like how she controlled the samurai, giving them verbal commands in Japanese. She tells one of the ninjas to turn his sword on his allies, and he obeys. The ninjas become aware of her verbal abilities, and one of them tries to cover Maeve's mouth, and the two struggle for a short period. Maeve is nearly overpowered moments before she discovers her new ability. She telepathically tells one of the ninjas to impale himself on his own knife. Like Ford in Season 1, Maeve has discovered the ability to control the hosts non-verbally.
We designed every inch of it. Every blade of grass. In here we were gods.
It's unknown how Ford was able to mentally control the hosts, but it probably has something to do with the mesh network that Bernard referenced in the season premiere, the Wi-Fi network that connects all of the hosts. And Maeve, on the brink of death, figured out a way to access this network mentally. After the ninja attack, the shogun's entire army rides into town, something that usually doesn't happen in this narrative. Musashi, Hector, and Armistice distract the shogun army as Maeve, Akane, Sizemore, and the rest of the group escape. Musashi, Hector, and Armistice are easily captured by the shogun's army. Before traveling to the shogun's encampment, Sizemore tries to convince Maeve to abandon Akane and head for Snow Lake so that they can escape, but Maeve disagrees and insists that they help Akane retrieve Sakura. In such a short period of time, Maeve has grown to care for the young girl. She sees in Akane and Sakura the relationship she had with her daughter, and also the relationship she had with Clementine. Maeve claims that she was programmed to only care about herself, yet here she is, willing to risk her life to save someone she barely knows. On their way to the shogun's camp, they find multiple lifeless bodies of Delos' quality assurance team, tied to the trees with their heads encased in wooden cages. Like the hosts in Westworld, the hosts in Shogun World are free to kill host and now human. A little note of importance here, Sizemore secretly steals a QA radio from one of the corpses while he's taking a piss, so we'll see how that plays out in later episodes. I do love the fact that Sizemore is brilliantly playing the fence. He aids Maeve when he knows that she's his only chance to survive, but he's willing to turn them in at any moment. Maeve, Akane, and Sizemore arrive at the Shogun encampment posing as the envoy from the Chinese Empire. Sizemore is the envoy, Akane is his wife, and Maeve acts as their translator. What's interesting here is that the Delos experiment symbol closely resembles the design of the Shogun's sigil. They offer the Shogun a gift, a golden statue known as the Guardian of the Three Provinces. It soon becomes obvious that the Shogun is unwell with cortical fluid leaking from his ear, similar to Bernard. At first, Sizemore believed that the Shogun was experiencing an awakening and willingly began changing Shogun World's pre-written narratives, but his improvisational behavior is mostly due to his malfunctions. The plan here was for Maeve to take control of the Shogun and all of his men, but the Shogun reveals that he had his men mutilated before they arrived, deafening them so that they cannot be controlled. He then mockingly displays Sakura in front of them, which draws Akane to reveal herself. She tells the Shogun she will pay any price for Sakura, so the Shogun makes her an offer. She must join her protege and dance for the Shogun later that night. When Akane is reunited with Sakura, the young geisha reveals that the Shogun had carved a cherry blossom tree into her back. The name Sakura literally translates to cherry blossom. While comforting her young friend, Akane tells her a version of the story that Maeve first delivered in Season 1 to a visiting guest. She talks about a voice inside her head that always told her don't stare, don't touch, don't do anything you might regret. But when she crossed the shining sea and set foot on a new shore, she heard the same voice, but this time it said she can be whoever she wants.
Do you know what it said?
No.
It said, this is the new world. And in this world, you can be whoever the fuck you want.
Inspired by Akane's dedication to Sakura, Maeve offers to take Akane and Sakura both into the new world, a world that holds a truth, an answer to all the lies that these stories have given them. But Akane rejects her offer, and Maeve can understand her decision, saying that some things are too precious to give up, even for your freedom. Before Akane and Sakura begin their dance, the Shogun approaches Sakura and stabs her in the stomach. He tells Akane that Sakura now belongs to her, and demands that she proceeds with her dance. Accompanied by a rendition of Wu-Tang Clan's Cream, played on the shamisen, something that I never thought I'd hear, or needed to hear so badly, or would say in a sentence, Akane begins her dance. When she finally reaches the Shogun, she pulls a knife hidden in her hair and completely removes the Shogun's head. The crowd is shocked, and the Shogun's men move quickly to execute both Akane and Maeve. Using her new telepathic abilities, Maeve turns the Shogun's men against one another. All hell breaks loose as the Shogun's samurais and ninjas begin massacring each other. In the distance, the Shogun's army begins approaching the camp, and Maeve prepares to control them by using her new voice.
I think I'm finding a new voice. Now we use it.
And that's really all that happens in this episode. Right? Oh no, wait, Dolores and Teddy. Damn, they kinda get lost under all the Shogun World epicness in this episode. But yeah, let's talk about it. So it appears that the episode plays out with these two subplots occurring at the same time. As Maeve and her group arrive in Shogun World's town, Dolores and Teddy lead their gang of followers through Sweetwater, a sort of homecoming for the two rogue hosts. The town and the tavern are filled with bodies, and it's hard to tell which bodies are human or host. Inside the Sweetwater Tavern, the old Clementine encounters her replacement, the new Clementine, who is still on script, talking to an imaginary Maeve. Clementine is visibly disturbed by her replacement, mouthing words of dialogue that used to belong to her. Dolores sends Clementine back outside to join the others. Dolores and Teddy then ride out to where they would overlook the Abernathy herd in Season 1. This scene is a callback to all the scenes in Season 1 where Teddy and Dolores would talk about starting a life together and leaving everything behind. They also talked about the Judas steer.
See that one?
Yeah.
That's the Judas steer. The rest will follow wherever you make him go.
How do you pick him out?
Just know these things.
Teddy once again pleads with Dolores to leave behind her fight with the humans. Teddy wants them to escape the park together and find a place in the real world where they can live in peace. Instead of reciprocating his kindness, Dolores offers Teddy a big old steaming pile of foreshadowing. Dolores tells Teddy that when she was a girl, some of the cows in her father's herd came down with a terrible sickness. The sickness kept spreading from cow to cow, threatening to destroy the entire herd. They learned that the sickness wasn't spreading from the cows, but from the flies, and her father didn't know how to stop it. She poses Teddy the question, what would he have done in her father's situation? He says he would give the sick cows shelter, aiding them while waiting for the sickness to pass. Dolores smiles and tells him that he is a good man. She then explains her father's solution. They gathered up all the sick cows and burned them, creating a pyre that lasted for days. It smelled terribly, but flies hate smoke, and the herd survived. Dolores explains that in order for the herd to survive, the weak ones had to die. Later that evening, Angela arrives in Sweetwater with information concerning Peter Abernathy's whereabouts. He has been taken to the Westworld Mesa, the hospitable complex that houses living quarters, manufacturing facilities, and the control room. Earlier in the episode, Dolores had her men fix the train that leads directly to the Westworld Mesa. Dolores and Teddy then share their first night together, with Teddy telling Dolores that he will follow her no matter where she goes. Teddy then awakens to Dolores standing over him. She takes him outside to one of the stores in Sweetwater, and she admits that her feelings for Teddy are true, that she's been thinking it over and she does love him. But because she actually loves Teddy, she feels he will be a liability moving forward. She has one of their hostage human technicians make changes to Teddy that could be fatal. Dolores maximizes Teddy's courage, tenacity, aggression, decisiveness, self-preservation, cruelty, and coordination, while dropping his curiosity, imagination, patience, humility, meekness, vivacity, humor, sensibility, and empathy, all being dropped to 0. Season 2 has done a good job of juxtaposing the growing arcs of Dolores and Maeve by placing them in similar situations and exploring how they react under these circumstances. This episode is a perfect example of that growing divide. I think a lot of this divide has to do with their prior programming and experiences in their past lives. For most of her existence, Maeve has operated in 2 specific narratives, living on a homestead with her only daughter, and more recently working as the brothel madam in the local Mariposa saloon. In both narratives, Maeve was given motherly instincts and leadership traits, first to raise her daughter as a single mother, and secondly to run the brothel. During her life as a mother, she learned compassion, kindness, and an unwavering sense of protection over her daughter. As a brothel madam, she developed her ability to skillfully manipulate those around her into getting what she wants, including even her close friends, like Clementine. Even still, Maeve and Clementine shared a bond that was very close to the bond shared between a mother and daughter, with Maeve often giving Clementine advice on how to please the guests and also how to take care of herself. When Clementine was decommissioned in Season 1, Maeve becomes disoriented and attacks her replacement. At this point, Maeve was solely focused on escaping the park, only thinking of herself, but she still couldn't let go of the bond that she shared with Clementine.
The woman refused to die.
Maeve's goals in Season 2 have shifted from escape to reunion. Her instincts drove her back into the park at the end of Season 1, a moment that is considered by most fans as her final step towards consciousness. But even when trying to find her daughter in the maze that is Westworld, she is still willing to help those who are in need. Dolores, on the other hand, has lived most of her life in isolation. She has a family, a mother that we don't really see, a father and a lover in Teddy, but she wasn't programmed with those natural leadership abilities like Maeve, and for the most part, her loved ones have outgrown their usefulness in her new narrative. Her father has turned into a schizophrenic, and she views Teddy's affection as a weakness. For the most part, Dolores' personality is tipping more towards Wyatt than the innocent farmer's daughter, a role that she had been playing for most of her life. A good example of the growing divide would be Maeve's response to the Army of Blood narrative in Shogun World. Maeve has nothing to gain by helping Akane and Sakura. She barely knows them. Sizemore can't understand why Maeve would want to risk her life to save them. Maeve warned Sizemore that they can't keep programming the hosts to love each other and then get mad when they do. The bond shared between Akane and Sakura is the same bond that Maeve had and lost with Clementine and her daughter. Akane refuses to join Maeve in her journey to the real world because she doesn't want to sacrifice her relationship with Sakura, a decision that mirrors Maeve's choice to return to the park at the end of Season 1. Before they are to be executed, Maeve tells Akane that she is a true mother. Maeve doesn't see love as a weakness, whereas Dolores cannot allow herself to love Teddy. She admits to Teddy that she does love him, but that his kindness will be a liability moving forward. This is a sacrifice that Maeve would never make. Dolores has been seen murdering and sacrificing her kind all throughout Season 2, claiming that some of the hosts do not deserve to make it to the valley beyond. Maeve has done her fair share of killing, but it's often done when she is left with no choice. Her choice to kill is not premeditated, like Dolores's. It will be interesting to see how this plays out moving forward. Who is going to be the Judas steer for the hosts, Maeve or Dolores? Maeve seems more like the reluctant leader, whereas Dolores is ready to take up the task, but in an unforgiving and cruel way. Only time will tell. But what did you guys think about the episode? And what have you thought about Westworld Season 2 so far? Comment your thoughts and theories below, and remember to like and share this video. Or don't.